Good evening, namaskar. Welcome everybody on behalf of the Bombay Management Association. This is Professor Mani welcoming you to a special edition of our Friday Fundamental series, where today we have two very distinguished speakers who are going to share with us their journey into rediscovering the ancient Indian wisdom and how these could play a significant role in making our lives more meaningful. I'm delighted to first welcome Dhruv Chhatralia, an international mergers and acquisitions attorney based in London. Dhruv, namaskar, and welcome to this session at the Bombay Management Association. I'm delighted to tell you that Dhruv is regarded as one of the rising stars of the law profession. Now, you might just about wonder, have we entered a wrong arena as part of this Zoom discussion? No, don't worry at all. The best thing about Dhruv is he is extremely passionate about discovering ancient Indian wisdom, Hinduism, the learnings from Bhagavad Gita, Bhagavad Puran, and the list is endless. Ladies and gentlemen, Dhruv has authored 21 books in this domain and perhaps has delivered over 400 sessions in the form of webinars and physical interactions, where he tries to share all the knowledge that he has acquired on the various aspects of wisdom that has been so enriched by our ancient texts, our ancient rishis, and the entire legacy and tradition that India is so famous for. So much so that he has even delivered sessions on these domains at the British Parliament, at the House of Commons, and this is an area of passion for Dhruv. He also conducts many of these seminars to raise funds for charity, mainly to look at how he could help foster Indian culture and take it right across to every part of the world. He's even been featured on BBC and several other international channels. Ladies and gentlemen, BMA is indeed blessed that we have with us in our midst Dhruv Chhatralia. And on behalf of all our past presidents, senior members of the BMA fraternity, all my colleagues on the executive committee, and every one of us, first Dhruv, swagat hai Bharat mein, because you're still in London, but we are receiving you here in India, and we look forward to a wonderful session of wisdom from you. Over to you, Dhruv.
Jai Shri Krishna, Jai Ma Bharat, and thank you, Professor Maniji, for that wonderful introduction, and thank you for asking me to speak on this wonderful occasion in front of the Bombay Management Association. It's an absolute delight. Even though I was born in the UK, I have a very strong connection with Bharat Mata, and absolutely delighted to see the people back home and to see your passion and interest for the Bhagavad Gita. So we'll start with some opening prayers. Om Gangabataya Namah. Ya kundentu sarahara davala, ya shubra prastavruta, ya veena varadanda mandita kara, ya shveta padmasana, ya brahmachuta shankara prabhutibi devai sada vandita, samam patu saraswati bhagavati, ishesha jadyapaha. Shuklam Brahma Vichara Sara Paramam Adyam Jagat Vyapinim Veena Pustadharinim Abhayadam Jadakarapaham Haste Spatamalikam Vidatatim Padmasane Samsitam Vandetam Parameshwarim Bhagavatim Buddhipradam Sharadam Vasudam Vasudam Devam Kamsajanura Mardhanam Devaki Paramanandam Krishnam Vande Jagadguru Guru Brahma, Guru Vishnu, Guru Devo Maheshwarai, Guru Sakshat Parabrahma, Tasmai Shri Guruve Namah, Narayan Namaskritya, Naram Cheva Narotamam, Devim Saraswati Vyasam, Tato Jayamudirayet, Shantakaram, Bhujikashenam, Padmanabham, Sunesham, Vishwataram, Gagana Sadusham, Megavarnam, Shubhangam, Lakshmi Kantam, Kamalanayanam, Yogi Vidyanagamyam, Vande Vishnu, Bhavabhayaharam, Sarva Lokekanatham, sarva loke kanatam. Om Shanno Mitra Sham Varuna Shanno Pravat Paryamaha Shanno Indra Baraspati Shanno Vishnu Rukmaha Namo Brahma Namaste Vayo Tvameva Pratyaksham Brahmasi Tvameva Pratyaksham Brahma Vadishami Rutam Vadishami Satyam Vadishami Tanma Bhavatu Tad Pakrama Bhavatu Avatu Mam Avatu Bhaktaram Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. So dear friends, when I was studying business management at my school, a certain phrase stood out to me throughout the course. That phrase came up and again during my studies, and that phrase was job satisfaction. Over the last decade, I've accumulated a lot of wisdom and have experienced what that phrase really means. I've been through circumstances where I've experienced what happens when one doesn't have job satisfaction, and I'm very grateful to the Lord because sometimes one's life is filled with occasions where one has to do activities that don't give one satisfaction and that feel meaningless. I've spent some years of my life in that way, and it's with Bhagwan's eternal grace that over the last 10 years I've been doing something which I've desired to do from inside. I feel deep inside that yes, this is where I belong to and this is what I want to do. And if you get to do what you desire from within, then it's because of Bhagwan's grace that you're able to do it. It gives me a unique sense of happiness that I've been having the right to be showered with the Lord's grace. The Lord has given me the opportunity to spread these sacred thoughts. I studied and attended the discourses on the Gita when I was like 10 years ago. Since then, the bond I formed with the Mother Gita has been getting stronger and stronger every day. To this date, I've not experienced any ebb coming into the relationship. Moreover, the spreading and promoting of the sacred thoughts of the Gita that this pure work involves has enabled me to attain yoga with Bhagwan. I received many requests to give talks on the Bhagavad Gita, but for me, these are not requests. Just like a child has been waiting for ages and you give the child something that makes it happy, in the same way, this is activity that makes me happy. The Gita is a very special scripture. Because of Bhagwan's grace, I've read the scriptures of all the religions, but the Gita is such a scripture in such a small amount of words and in such an unfailing way describes the metaphysics of management. Warren Hastings described the scripture as a study of death and killing, and one that describes how one can win in life. Related to this, I'm saying that I'm a warrior, and I have great pleasure in saying this, and I have a full right to say this with courage. I am the warrior. I do not like to cry in life. I do not like to run away in life. I like to go to war in inverted commas. And when going to war during my life, whenever I face challenging circumstances, I found inspiration in the Gita. And my situation during these battles can be compared to familiar situation when you watch films. One becomes so involved in the film that you put yourself in the shoes of one of the characters. Is a psychologically a very natural thing for a human being to do. In the same way, I imagine myself in the chariot going to the war in the same position Arjun was in during the Mahabharata. During the war of life, whenever I needed inspiration and willpower and management, then I've seen myself standing in place of Arjun in the chariot. I thought that Krishna is speaking to me instead of Arjun. And from this process, I've gained strength. And the strength and power I've gained by reflecting and meditating on the Gita, which has grown over days, months, and years, I now wish to give you all. I never say that I'm knowledgeable, and I never say I'm the rightful spokesperson of the Gita, and no one can say this. I've learnt the Gita from various great personalities. I've read, thought, and meditated on various versions of the Gita, and the prasad of this I wish to give to you all. So in management, when one looks at society, one has two ways of measuring it. One is a way of materiality, and the one is a way of spirituality. You can measure a person materiality, and when you measure them, you can also measure them spiritually. When you use the way of materiality, you look at what one possesses and what this becomes important. Who has what? How big is his house? How many cars does he have? What is his business? How much is in his bank account? How much one possesses and what one has becomes important in materiality. But when you measure someone in management by the way of spirituality, what you have is not important, but who you are is important. Who are you? Having does not become important, but being becomes important. And the realization and shape of being is wonderful. The problems and miseries in the workplace and management are mainly as a result, in my opinion, of the predominance of a material way of thinking and a forgetting of a spiritual way of thinking. Because nowadays, people in the organization are measured by what they have and not who they are. And every individual wants to prove himself. in front of himself first, in front of his family second, and in front of society or group, for example, relatives, friends, acquaintances third, and finally, in front of the world at large. Every person's trying to prove himself. And when each person tries to prove themselves, all they see is, and all they look for in another person is what that person has got. Sarve guna kancham nashrante. When the only measure of a person is what he possesses, and every person is trying to prove themselves, then there is only one road left to take. I will keep gathering what I can. Then the world will respect me. Then the world will adore me, which I'm looking for in other people. When we talk nowadays of materiality, material mindset in management, and ask what it is, it's nothing else than everyone trying to prove that there's something. And because they have to gather these things, they have to prove there's something and gather those things. They run after objects. The person running after objects knows there's nothing in those objects. And I see owners of various objects in front of me. They have many kinds of things. And I meet people who have piles and piles of things, but within there is something empty. There is always something missing from their lives. Then why run after these things? Moreover, when you find out that there's nothing in these objects, why do they still run after these things? One of the effects of running after objects is that one is not running for themselves, but for other people. I have no need for objects. Once you have an affluence of objects, one of the effects is that they become worthless. When you have 10 cars in the garage and the 11th car comes, then it hardly makes a difference. No one in the house even knows that another car has come. No one knows for 15, 20 days. And when the daughter of the house goes to college and goes to find the car, she would ask the driver if it's a new car. This is affluence. Why do people still run after objects? They're not running for themselves, but for other people. And after running for other people, they become emptier and emptier. And in their heart, there is a feeling of deep sadness. And this is the problem of the modern age. This was a problem at the end of the 20th century. This is a problem at the beginning of the 21st century. And so why is the Gita necessary today in management? Because a few years back, people decided that if we gather these things, we'll be happy. But now they have these things, and yet there's still a deficiency. When one is sad because they do not have the objects they desire, it's a very shallow happiness. They're without possessions. But when they're sad because they have those possessions, that sadness is very deep. When one is sad because they're hungry, you hand them 2 rotis and the sadness goes away. But what about the sadness when one's stomach is filled? This sadness is a very deep sadness. Today, fast progress has been beneficial in many ways, which has benefited everyone. 50 years ago, happiness was not as easily available as this. Life was very problematic. In between all these happy moments, what do I do when I'm sad? There's an ocean of happiness nowadays, and the island on which the person is sitting is one of sadness. And every now and then, one has to come back to the island. When you go to swim in the ocean, you can swim for 1 hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, but you have to come back to the island. You can't keep swimming in the ocean because you're a person, not a fish. And whenever a person comes back to the island after swimming in the ocean, the fury of sadness becomes unbearable. Until now, society has been described by economists as a split between have-nots and haves in management. I want to describe a third type of person, have-nots in spite of being haves. They have everything, and yet they still have an experience of not having. And this sadness is a major sadness of today. What does the Gita have to say about this major sadness of today? How will Sri Krishna be able to help with this major sadness? With that vision in mind, and with the challenges of modern management in life, we'll study the Gita. And only then is the Gita useful. Otherwise, we just have the 5 Pandavas. And one of these Pandavas, Arjuna, is standing in a battlefield of Kurukshetra. He doesn't want to fight. And Krishna tells him to fight. What has that got to do with you or me? The war happened and the Pandavas won. Everything was finished. It worked out well in the end. Now what? It has no value other than the story. Then why has it remained a major Shastra for ages and ages? There's only one reason. Sambhavami yuge yuge. I come into being from age to age. This is my vision of the meaning of the Gita, because it applies to every battle. Arjuna did not know at the time, but 5,000 years later, the words of Sri Krishna were saying to him will be meaning to help us in management in this respect. But Sri Krishna knew, and that's why he said, Sambhavami yuge yuge. It has always been the case in different eras the different meanings that the Gita has from different people has always made the listener or reader feel as if the Gita is from them. And only Krishna knew this. Shri Krishna knew that the Gita is a contemporary management scripture. It has always been a contemporary scripture, and we're going to pay our respects to the Gita, and the bond we've lost with the divinity, we're going to attempt to re-establish once again. And these are the words of the Supreme Being himself. In today's times, in management, machines have developed in business and appreciated, but human beings have depreciated. So we're going to go through this Gita from a practical perspective. For those who want to gain from something from the scripture, I'll try with the blessings of Krishna to make sure they don't go back empty-handed. Before we study the Bhagavad Gita from the perspective of management, I want to do a little retrospection on the first chapter. I like the word Sihavalokam, which means retrospection in Sanskrit, which is very important when you retrospect and give feedback and you analyze in management. In Sanskrit, there's 3 types of avalokam or retrospections, such is the beauty of Sanskrit, which are Vihangavalokam, Mrugavalokam, and Sihavalokam. As regards Vihangavalokam, Vihan means a bird. A bird observes when it's flying in the sky looking down, and we say that it has a bird's eye view. It can see a lot of things at the same time, but there's no point in looking at it this way, and there's not so much detail in this view. One may say that they've seen things from this view, but they don't understand anything. For example, if an airplane takes off from Mumbai airport and you look down, then you see the whole of Mumbai in one go, but you cannot say that you've seen Mumbai. In one way, you've seen it, but not completely. You can tell someone you've seen Mumbai, but if they ask you where Prempuri Ashram is, you'll scratch your head, saying you don't know because you've only seen Mumbai from above. But if you stay in Mumbai and go for a 7-day satsang at the Prempuri Ashram, then you know where it is and what happens there. Therefore, Vihangavalokam doesn't have much significance. Secondly, there's Mrugavalokam. Mrug means a deer. A deer is a very fearful animal. When it walks in the jungle, then after a few steps, it looks back to make sure that nothing is coming behind it to attack it or nothing is tracing it. It keeps turning around and looking back. There is Mrugavalokam, but there's fear in this. The third is Sihavalokam. When the king of the jungle, the lion, is walking in the jungle, it takes about 10 or 15 steps and with style looks back on how it's walked. The people that observe lions have said that the behavior of a lion is a display of its royalty, and because of its pride, it observes how much it has walked and where. Only then does it carry on walking. Therefore, the observation we're doing is Sihavalokam. So the Bhagavad Gita began with Dhritarashtra's questions to Samjaya about what his sons and the sons of Pandu did on the battlefield. Samjaya said to Duryodhan, he went to Dronacharya, and Duryodhan told Drona that whatever you are, look after Bhishma, because he knows that as long as Bhishma is there, he has no need to worry. Bhishma saw that Duryodhan was scared, and to get rid of his fear, he blew his conch. When the ruling party's commander-in-chief blew his conch, all the conch's kettle drums and instruments were played on both sides. On the side of the Pandavas, the first conch was blown by Shri Krishna, and the Pandavas knew it's the responsibility given to them by the divine. They said, if the Bhagwan wishes for us to go in the battlefield, so be it. After Krishna blew his conch, Arjun blew his conch, followed by Bhima, Yudhishthira, and many others, such as Draupadi's brother Drishaduma. After all these conches were blown, the sound rents the hearts of the Kauravas. This one very, very small event teaches us so much about management. Look at the order in which the conches were blown in the Kaurava side. First conch was Bhishma, commander-in-chief. Then it was done all in rank order and in age order. But look at the side of the Pandavas. The first conch was blown by Shri Krishna. The divine Lord comes first. Then Arjun blew his conch. But Arjun is neither the commander-in-chief of the Pandavas' army nor the eldest brother, but he blew the conch second. Then Bhima, who's not the eldest brother nor the commander-in-chief. Then Yudhishthira, the eldest brother, and then Drishaduma, who was the commander-in-chief. This looks like a random order, but no, there's a very deep meaning behind this. The dryness and discipline that was there in the Kauravas' army was not here in the Pandavas' army. But for them, it doesn't matter who comes first or last in the names or the credits. The most important thing is that what is the purpose for which we are gathered here. For the Kauravas, it was all about the discipline, the rank, who gets the credit. But for the Pandavas, we are here for a big purpose. So when your purpose is fixed, When you know the purpose for which you're here to fight, to do the battle, then that's where the power comes in. And that's why the Pandavas were victorious, because they knew the purpose for which they were here on the battlefield, to do their dharma. So that was like a fundamental difference. You often see when you have wedding invites, if a person's name is not mentioned in that invite, all hell breaks loose. This person has not done nothing in his life just because he's the eldest. He wants to be named. But this is the way, like the key in management, that in order to achieve a great thing as a team, it is very, very important that the name and the status and credit comes last. The first word in the Bhagavad Gita is the dharma, and the last word of the Bhagavad Gita is mama, meaning me. So dharma comes first, and mama comes last, meaning me. So Shri Krishna, when he tries to get Arjun to fight the war in the second chapter, he starts talking about the importance of swadharma. There's two types of scriptures. There's asti pradhan and astu pradhan. Similarly, there's two types of theories, gnatva and kartavya. Gnatva means theories to be learned, and kartavya means theories are to be put into practice. Swadharma is a kartavya theory because it's how we operate in management. It's not right that Arjun stops fighting because it's a warrior and it's his duty to fight. There'll be nothing more meritorious than Arjun to fight that battle. Great personalities say that Swadharma is nothing more than accepting the rules of the divine's game. In whatever games you play, there'll be rules, and you will only enjoy the games if you play by the rules. Otherwise, you won't enjoy the game. What would happen if a group of people play cricket and none of them obey the rules? None of them will enjoy it. In the same way, this universe is the divine's great game. Lok abhakti lila ke valyam ek akiramate. Why did the divine create this universe? Why are we here? Because he was alone and he didn't like it, so others were created. But when others are created, then there's problems, because when others come, there's fears. Diti ad ve bhavyam. All the fear in the world is because of others. All the fears in the world are because others are there. If there's no others, there's no fear. But would one be satisfied if one were alone? Therefore, others are needed. But the creation of others leads to a fear, for example, the fear of public opinion. So what can one do? Secondly, when others come, they're either more powerful or weaker than you. If the person is weaker, then he'll fear you and will think that they'll try to exert their power over you. But if someone is more powerful than you, then you'll be scared of him, because it will be the other way around. These two things, strong and weak, the haves and have-nots, will always be there. When others come, the fear comes. So how should we behave with others in management? This is what Swadharma is there for. Divine gave birth and began his game. This whole world is a game, and following the rules of this game is Swadharma. Look about how broad Swadharma of the Gita is. It's not about Hindu, Sikh, Muslim, etc. It's about how you make your life great. Not only that, it's about how you can make the lives of all those around you great as well, so society can advance. This is how you should live your life. This is Swadharma, and even if Arjun looks at it from this angle, then it's not right that he leaves his battlefield. The Swadharma tells us how to live our lives. Our great rishis have divided people in society into four varnas: Brahmin, Kshatriya, Vaishya, Shudra, meaning the intellectuals, warriors, merchants, and people who give service. However, this type was not determined by birth, but the person's root interests. It's very interesting that whenever society's been divided around the world, it's always been in four sections. It's always in all civilizations. In ancient Greek culture, they were advanced and divided into society into four parts: aristocrats, warriors, traders, slaves. Roughly aligns with the four ancient Egyptian culture. Society was divided into four parts. Same with Chinese culture. This is the case in all civilizations. Varna means color, not caste. Color. The color is determined by your mental characteristics and your interest. And only after looking at this is the Varna decided, which is crucial in giving people the right tasks for them in management. One type of Varna is people in society that have interest in knowledge. You can give them possessions, but possessions won't matter to them. If they don't get power, it won't matter to them. They just want knowledge. These are the people that we call Brahmins. If we look at society today, these are the intellectuals, for example, doctors, engineers, scientists. These are Brahmins. A person that spends all their time in a laboratory making inventions is, in my opinion, a Brahmin. The scientist who invented penicillin, Alexander Fleming, he was approached by various company representatives around the world and was asked to give them the patent. He got everyone together and gave them the patent for penicillin. He told them all the formula and told them to make it. The speech he gave to these people is worth reading. He said that any scientist that has invented something has stood on the shoulder of giants that are his predecessors. I've invented penicillin, but it's because of the countless people who experimented and tried to invent it before I did. I used these results and was therefore successful. Therefore, I do not have the right alone to take credit for the invention. So he gave penicillin to society. The reason why we can get penicillin for so cheap in the stores is because of this. If he had kept the patent and asked for royalty, then he would have become extremely rich with millions of dollars, but he didn't want it. So in my opinion, Alexander Fleming is what we call a Brahmin. A Kshatriya is a type of person in society that has an interest in power. The definition in Sanskrit is Kshatraya iti Kshatriya. Shar means a difficulty or problem, and the person who saves one from this is a Kshatriya. The Kshatriya one was created because the rishis looked at the social contract theory. It was a social contract. During primitive times, the first men and women used to wander around alone, and this necessity to wake up in the morning to find fruits and flowers or to search for animals. They would eat the fruits and so on, fill their belly and go to sleep. The next day they wake up and start looking again. There was only necessity to eat and sleep like animals do. But often it happened that whenever they went looking for food, the animals would kill them. So additionally, they sleep properly at night, because if they fell asleep, there's a lion or tiger walking around that will kill them at night. So man thought, at this rate, I'll never be able to sleep. I have to be alert. So people got together and say, why don't two people stay out at night and guard us while we sleep? So they did that. So if an animal came, those two will face them and guard them. So the two told the rest not to worry because they'll guard the group at night. But they thought, if we stay up at night, you have to give us food during the day. We get hungry. So the rest of the group told them not to worry because the food of the day will be gathered and allocated to them. This was the primary tax, how the tax system started. One would protect the other in return for something. Every time these people became more powerful and became the Kshatriyas. So this is social contract theory. So the rest of the people can live in peace. This happened all over the world. So many people have the mental attitude, they want to get rid of the other's problems. They don't mind what happens to themselves, as divine has given them the strength to get rid of others' difficulties. They need the power, the throne, the positions, Kshatriya. The third Varna are those not interested in knowledge or power. They want possessions. They're the Vaishyas, Vishiti iti Vaishya. There are two phrases in English: power is money, money is power. For Kshatriya, power is money, and for Vaishya, money is power. They're interested in possessions and money, and they used to be farmers at the beginning, and they turned into the merchants. The fourth burn are those whose interests are to serve society. They have a need for looking after the psychological needs of society. They call them Shudra. Those are ones that cannot see others sad, who want to get rid of other people's difficulties. Shudra Dravati iti Shudra. So during primitive times, people were walking bare feet in the jungle. When a thorn gets stuck in the foot, they will start screaming. Blood will come out. Someone would have saw this and get sad. They said, I want to get rid of other pains. So they got leaves on the trees and created footwear. So we have the shoemakers, Shudras. They get rid of the bodily pains of society. People must not have had clothes, and they got cold during the winter or rainy season, so they created clothes. A tailor is a Shudra. We had no houses to live in, so we lived in caves or trees. So the art of architects is Shudra. Therefore, the system is not useless or discriminatory. It's a logical way of thinking. Because one cannot see others' physical difficulties, it becomes a Shudra. But when India was invaded, the British invented this system of the caste, which comes from the Portuguese word costos, and changed the meaning of Shudra from Shudra Dravati to Shudra, one who gets sad from seeing others' physical pain, to one whose physical situation makes us sad. The people created these rules that if people leave outside a town, they should not get water from inside the well because of the British Act that was passed in the 19th century, because the tribal people were the greatest freedom fighters. So Arjun is a Kshatriya, and therefore his duty is to save others from harm, but his dharma is to fight. And so that is a quick overview within 30 minutes of some management principles in the Bhagavad Gita. The Bhagavad Gita is a very in-depth Shastra, and our talks on the Bhagavad Gita for around 225 hours are available on our website at www.gitaclass.org, G-I-T-A class.org. So if you're interested, you can watch those. And if you're interested in kind of getting involved, our organization has 34 WhatsApp groups. So if you want to message +44 7904 720 516 with your full name, you'll be added into those WhatsApp groups. +44 7904 720 516. And been delighted to speak to you all and look forward to receiving the questions.
Thank you so much, Dhruv. That was very profound and communicated in a very simple and effective manner. I guess for many of them who were present in this audience, it would have been a wonderful trip down memory lane about so many things that one has kept reading about ancient Indian wisdom. Maybe we were all indoctrinated with the help of storybooks, comics, the Amar Chitra Katha, as we call it, very famous in India. And today, the manner in which you expressed it, applying it to corporate life, was indeed very, very revealing. Thank you so much for your very, very sincere sharing. I'm going to
Thank you so
now
much.
take some questions from the chat box and bring them to your notice, while I request the other participants to post their questions in the chat box so that I can bring it to Dhruv's attention. While we are at it, I will also share the contact details that Dhruv mentioned. So don't worry about that. It will come in the chat box in a couple of minutes from now. So Dhruv, the first question that we'd like to try to seek an answer from you. You correctly said that today's world is more towards materiality and not so much onto spirituality. In this rat race, how does one begin the process of converting people's mindsets?
Okay. There's various different ways. I think in the Bhagavad Gita, Sri Krishna used the one example of a person who is the example, ideal role model of the Bhagavad Gita. And he gave the example of Janaka, who was Sita's father, Sita from the Ramayan's father. He had a massive palace with servants, everything, all the material pleasures, yet he was completely detached. And I think the way to convince others, Sri Krishna said when giving that example, that whatever great people do, others follow as well. So the key is when people talk about uniting all Indians, we can't, it will never work until we become better Indians. Or when we talk about uniting all spiritual people, it will never work until we ourselves becoming more spiritual. So when we imbibe those spiritual qualities in an unapologetic way and are proud of those spiritual qualities and achieve success in those spiritual qualities, people automatically get drawn to us. So the key is to not only teach people through the actual teachings themselves, but also show them via examples. Like if you look at someone like Ramana Maharshi, he doesn't even need to say anything. Someone just sits in his presence and they're completely silent. If you look at the great rishis, they didn't need to do anything. The animals, like the tigers and buffaloes who had venom towards each other, would be sitting peacefully at the hermitages because the environment created. So by performing that sadhana, the spiritual practice ourselves and gaining those spiritual qualities, and as per Krishna's advice in the Bhagavad Gita, having excellence in everything we do in the world, we can convince people that way. But also knowledge is very powerful. When you have the knowledge to be able to refute arguments against spirituality, it is very, very powerful. And knowledge is empowering. Knowledge removes fears. The prayer I gave to Ma Saraswati at the beginning of my talk, it asked Ma Saraswati to remove our fears. And fear gets removed when you have knowledge of something. When you don't have knowledge of something, you have fear towards that thing. But when you have the knowledge, the fear goes away. So when we're armed and equipped with that knowledge, we're able to naturally make someone spiritual through the power of our voice. So that combination of knowledge and action are very, very important. The action by which we become role models and the knowledge by which we can present things logically. And combined with that is the bhakti. Some people can be won over their emotions when they see the compassion and love that naturally radiates from us. People naturally get drawn to that. Love is the most powerful emotion. If you love someone, the powerful waves from the heart are more powerful than the waves from the brain, so they can feel it even if you are far away. That is the power of love. So the power of bhakti, which is even higher than love, is the deification of love, is so powerful. And can be won over. The great saint, you all are based in Maharashtra, the great saint of Maharashtra, Swami Ramdas, who was the guru of Shivaji Maharaj, the great king of India and Maharashtra, was once staying in somebody's home. And at night time, they woke up in the middle of the night. All they could hear was Ram, 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 Ram. They were wondering, where's this sound coming from? And they just like went around. There was no chanting going on. They saw that it was out of this Swami Ramdas's aura. The name Ram was coming out because he had performed that sadhana and imbibed those emotional qualities of bhakti, the enhanced emotions, that he was able to win people over through the feelings as well.
All right, that's interesting. Dhruv, the next question is, a lot of people are religious, but they don't believe in rituals. What is your view about the importance of rituals in religion and spiritualism?
Absolutely. Very, very good question. And thank you for asking that question. I believe that the rituals are more important, just as important as the philosophy. And there's a big movement going on today, which is called the spiritual but not religious movement, i.e. the people who are interested in philosophy, not the rituals. If it wasn't for the rituals, I would not, at a young age, have been asking questions about why we do this, why we do that. Every ritual within the Vedic tradition is pure scientific. If you look at, for example, with the Mahamrityunjay mantra, reciting the Mahamrityunjay mantra, the 32 syllables align with the movements of the planet Venus around the sun. And because the planet Venus is the only planet which the South Pole and the North Pole are reversed. And the name for Venus in the Vedic tradition is Shukracharya. And Shukracharya, read the Shiv Mahapurana, did completely tapasya for 20 years facing down. Shiva represents the sun, and the Venus takes 32 times 20 equals, if you do the number of chandas of the Mahamrityunjay mantra 108 times. So it's a complete science behind why we do everything. If you look at, for example, why we do the pujas, everything is aligned with the 5 elements. So we have the puja, we offer the flowers, which is aligned with the ether element. The divo is aligned with the fire element. The jal, we offer the water, aligned with the water element. We offer the fragrance with obviously the other elements as well, the touch and sense. So each of the 5 elements are completely aligned with the different deities, and we do the rituals and worship of the 5 main deities in the Vedic tradition. The Ganesh is aligned with the ether element because he blesses us. The Mataji, or the Divine Mother, is aligned with the wind element because it punishes or protects. The Shiva is aligned with the fire element because he dissolves. The Vishnu and his incarnations are aligned with the water element because he sustains, water sustains. And the Brahma, or Hiranyagarbha Surya, the sun, which is the 5th main deity, is aligned with the earth element because the earth is great. Everything that is wealth in the world comes from the earth. And if you look at the artis of Ma Lakshmi, which represents wealth, and the artis refer to the sun and the moon look upon you. So Lakshmi is the wealth, and the word earth, meaning wealth, comes from earth, which is earth. So all these elements have a powerful symbolism, and everything we do according to our rituals has a deep scientific basis. So when you're doing the rituals without even thinking about it, you're becoming spiritual. But with the philosophy, you obviously have to think and contemplate on it. So both these things are very, very important. And the rituals build discipline into you. For example, when you do fasting is not for everyone, of course, because of body type. But when you're doing these things, they discipline your mind in a very, very strong way. And more than anything, put science to aside, but all of the aside, it's a beautiful thing. The culture, the richness. I brought up in the West. So many Western people are so interested in the Vedic tradition, not just because of philosophy, but the rituals we have. The fact that my grandmother passed away in December last year, she used to leave food and water for the birds and animals like the squirrels, pigeons that used to come to our garden. What a beautiful thought that everything from what we eat, we leave for the others, for the animals. It's such a beautiful ritual. These things must be kept. The tradition when we give the water and rice to the ancestors, we're not doing it from the ancestors, we're doing it for ourselves. Because when we do that offering, we ask ourselves, compared to what the ancestors required of me, how much have I progressed in that direction? And we always have those days when we get to contemplate. And everything that happens according to the Vedic tradition, the festivals happen according to the tithis. So if we look at the solar system, this moon moves around, obviously around the Earth, and the planets move around the sun. According to the distance between the sun and the moon, we have the ditties according to which the festivals are based. Now, the distance between the Earth and the sun is 108 times the circumference of the sun. The distance between the Earth and the moon is 108 times the circumference of the moon. So the 108 and 18 number is of a great significance, and that's why we do the 108 manas of jap. So everything within the rituals is done according to the agamas of the Vedas and are very, very important.
All right, that's a very scientific answer to a question like this. Thank you so much. I'm handing over to Indrapal Singh ji. You had a question, sir. Please go ahead.
Yeah. Hello. Yeah. Dhruv. Yeah. My question is, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you very well.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. You had mentioned about the caste system. And, some years ago, I was talking to a very well-known management consultant after the economic reforms took place in India. And then after a while, I made a comment that given the kind of progress we're making, I'm sure in a decade or two, we'll be a great country. So he disagreed. He said, no, India can never be a great country because of your caste system. And I believe that he was right in his own way. He did not have the knowledge that you just shared, that what was the original Varnas and what they really meant. But look at the caste system, that is the damage it has done. Still we have quotas, and we are fighting that within Maratha there should be OBC, ABC, etc., etc. And the thing goes on. Ultimately, every policy we make finally comes down to the caste system. So is not a deliberate design by the British or their insight to keep India down, which we are not able to come out of it so far? Yes. Your views, I mean, do you think, how should we come out of it?
That's a brilliant point in Nepalji, and it's a big issue. Like when we look at it, India is the only country where I guess the majority is discriminated against. So it's a big issue when we look at all the great talent that is coming out of places like Bangalore and moving to the US because they're not getting the opportunity in India because of quota and reservations. It's definitely a broken system, and a system where if you look at before the British came, a lot of like the culture in terms of the Varnas and the Jatis and so on were very, very mixed. People didn't even think about these things. When the British came, everything was done by quota. This is the religion, this is the Varna, and so on. And because of that, these different groups started like batting against each other, like OBCs or whatever, who want the quotas. For India to progress, exactly as your friend said, this whole concept of the reservations needs to be eliminated, and any discrimination that does take place on this, it should obviously be eliminated. But the way to do that is to preserve and promote the actual traditional knowledge of it, of the Varna system, and promote it in the educational system. But that it's nothing to do with the birth. The fact that it's the mental characteristic. If someone is predominantly the water element, they're a Brahmin. If someone is predominantly fire element in their body, it's a Kshatriya. Air element, Shudra, and the earth element is a Vaishya. So that comes according to the mental characteristics. And the way to do that is to imbibe that in the education system, and at the same time remove this whole concept of like the reservations, because it discriminates and prevents the natural meritocratic talent. In order for society to thrive, meritocracy has to be there. Like if you look in China, despite all the flaws and everything, if a person in a local village is doing well in government, he'll be promoted, he'll go all the way to the top. But if someone in India, like a local collector is doing well, the media will come after them. They'll be posted somewhere like far away, which has no influence. So yeah, no, it's a big issue there. And a lot of the kind of issues that are coming in the modern economical system come as a result of this reservation concept. Some of the good, but not obviously like out of the British, but the way things work in the villages. I always regard India as not a contract-based economy, but a relationship-based economy. And so if you go into the villages of India, if one family is not doing well, the other families will come together and support them, and it works in a very nice community way. That's why a lot of the progress of India can't be measured in the way Western countries can be measured, because they're contract-based economies. But we're a relationship-based economy, which is a key distinction there. But yeah, I think there's a lot of social evils that arise as a result of a discriminated system created by the British before that as well. So I think kind of like what we call jugaad as well, like corruption, was done because there was these concepts of tax systems were established which discriminated against certain people based on like religion and so on. And so people of certain religion had to pay more. And as a result, people had to find ways to get out of the system. And this has been ingrained for generations and generations. And in America, there's a big reconciliation of what the people did to the slaves, what people did in terms of discrimination. But in India and the UK, there's not so much a reconciliation of what the British and the other like invaders in India did to Indians in terms of destroying libraries and what I think hermitages and so on, like great like sacrifices of like the great Sikh gurus, the great sacrifices of the great warriors is completely like a whitewashing of history because the people who wrote our history were colonial people. And so because of that, the education system is definitely broken, and the traditional Vedic system, like Pranab Mukherjee and others have said, needs to be definitely re-established, and it should be a very important part of us. And I give a good example that in my business, when I speak to people from different backgrounds, when I speak to Americans, they all know about the history, the founding fathers, and the American history, what the revolution. When I speak to the Chinese people, they all know about Confucius, they all know about Lao Tzu. When I speak to English people, all of them have studied Shakespeare in school. But when I speak to Indian people, it's two things that always comes up in a conversation. That's Bollywood and cricket. There's no concept of the deep richness that there is in the culture. It's all about the pop culture. A very kind of shallow way of looking things. And it's when Indian people start recognizing the richness they have in their culture and what it has to offer to the world that it becomes important. India can never become a Vishwa Guru until it revives this culture within India itself, because the rest of the world is following up on it, be it botanicals, herbs, the number system, anything you can name that's come out of India. The Western cultures embraced it and digested it. Western culture, yoga, Ayurveda is massive in the West, but in India, it's a big indifference towards it because of colonialization, and we definitely need to get out of that. So very good question, Nepalji.
Thank you.
I'll now move on to one more of our participants, Dr. Ketna Mehta. Please go ahead.
Namaste to Professor Mani,
Namaste.
Singh ji, and all the friends at BMA and Dhruv. Dhruv, my question is specific. Are there any management lessons in the Bhagavad Gita which talks about equality? I'll tell you where I come from. I'm a person with disability. Our NGO works for people with spinal cord injury, and we have the corporate sector, which needs to create infrastructure and the mindset for accepting people with disabilities in all walks of life. So that's a precise question.
Yes, no, thank you, Dr. Ketnaji, for your question. And it's partially related to Indrapalji's question as well. The Bhagavad Gita in chapter 9, it says that no matter which background you're from, whichever varna you're from, no matter what gender you are, this knowledge is applicable to you. So it's clearly stated there. He clearly states that this knowledge is applicable to women in chapter 9 of the Gita. So that is stated there. Yeah, in the Bhagavad Gita, like qualifications are given for someone who's knowledgeable, qualifications are given for someone who's divine, and in none of those qualities are someone's skin color or whether their gender or their disability or anything like that mentioned. The qualities are mentioned are when you're looking at divine person, first quality is fearlessness, abhayatva. When you're looking at the qualities of a devotee, the first quality is person has no ill will towards anything, then friendliness, then compassion. When the qualities of a knowledgeable person are given, the first quality is amrita, humility. So in no way is it said that a person who does X, Y, Z, it's these subtle qualities that are important in Bhagavad Gita. But the chapter 9, it goes into a lot of detail, because if you look at the history of discrimination, particularly against women in the West, it's been absolutely absolutely atrocious, and not just against women, but against different races. Like people in the West, like used to say, the reason why the word woman comes from woo man, someone who woos a man, because of like the Adam and Eve concept. And there's really wrong concepts that were ingrained. But if you look at the ancient Vedic tradition, the mantras from the Rig Veda, the first mantras were given by women. If you International Women Day is coming up in 3 days, if you read the life of Ahalya Holkar from Bhopal, incredible story of a woman who renovated a lot of the sacred places all over India. You must read her life story. Across like there's Indian culture has always been kind of an inclusive culture. If you look at the history, when the Jewish people were chased away by the Romans, we accepted them. When the Zoroastrian people were kind of chased away from Persia, the king of Gujarat accepted them. If you look at the Syrian Christians, they were accepted in Kerala. And more recently, the Dalai Lama, when he fled away from China, he was accepted and embraced in India. So there's this rich culture in India, and it roots from the fact that rather than faith and belief, it's about wisdom and harmony. So it's not about the faith and belief, it's about wisdom, harmony, and that equality concept is rooted in chapter 9, especially of the Bhagavad Gita. So thank you, Dr. Ketnaji.
A corollary to that, if I may ask, so are
Yes.
the varnas fused now? Because you have something like social entrepreneurship. It comes as a service and also a business.
Yes, yeah. So I think the Varna system, nobody actually really follows it anymore. And so, to find out someone's Varna, there's a very subtle process that needs to take place to find someone's Varna. And I, when meeting someone within 5 minutes, I can tell their Varna. So it's a very kind of subtle process. But nowadays, what people follow is their surnames, which is more not even jati; it's more like the family tradition. And so, as a result of that, there's a lot of kind of like schemes in place for like this Dr. Indraji was talking about. So I think kind of first we have to discover what the Varna is and allocate people their roles in society based on that, because that is what roles they'll enjoy the most within. So I think the Varna system, you have to be re-educated on it and then reallocated. It needs to be reallocated in society. And it's not something that can ever happen overnight. It needs to be more of an evolution than revolution, because the infrastructure of society can't be dismantled. It needs to be built in the education system first. People naturally will go via those routes. So I think that's the way to go about it.
Thank you.
All right, Dhruv, there are many questions, but in the interest of time and to respect your time and the fact that you got to get back to work, it's a working day for you. I'm going to just have one question coming up to you. And that is from one of our participants who says, Bhagavad Gita is expressed and explained differently by different authors. So one hears of Shiv Gita, we hear of Vishnu Gita, etc., etc. Would you throw some light on what are the differences, if any?
The difference between those different Gitas, right?
Yes.
Okay, fine. Yeah. So Gita literally means a song. So it's a song. And you have various different songs sung by many different people. So the Bhagavad Gita is a Gita that is sung by the divine. Bhagavad means the divine. You have the Ashtakakra Gita, who is Janak's teacher, that is sung by Ashtakakra. Then you have the Gita sung by Bhishma, the Bhishma Gita. You have the Uddhav Gita, and the Gita sung between the conversation between Krishna and Uddhav. So many different Gita. It just literally means a song. What's I guess the uniqueness of the Gita in terms of the Bhagavad Gita? It's obviously described as India's national book. So it's obviously the most popular, the most commonly read, the most widely translated, most commentated. So one cannot know India, its essence, its identity, without having first examined the Bhagavad Gita and looked into its profound instructions about life, human interactions, the secrets of human psychologies, the keys to higher consciousness. So it reflects the complexity, the paradox, the mystery, the beauty of India. And in its perennial search for the eternal infinite, it has the ability to reflect the abundance of life as well. So Shri Krishna is the figure who's recited the Bhagavad Gita, who represents India's yogic culture. and civilization. He's known as the divine incarnation, the Yog Avatar, the sage of the highest order, who's able to teach a variety of paths of different temperaments of people that motivates humanity to achieve the highest potential. So he's got the charisma, and he inspires the divine within us, yet teaches us that clarity of position. So the genesis of the Gita, of the battlefield, it's its most compelling factor, because all life is a battle or struggle between many dualities within and around us in nature and humanity, particularly like adharma and dharma. So life is not simple face-off between good and evil, black and white, moralistic clash between a right and wrong. Life is a struggle to go forward in a maze of competing forces in different directions with different influence. So like Arjuna at the start of Gita, it's easier for us not to want to fight, to avoid pain and complications, but this just lets life pass us by and condemns us to the limitations of what we've already become. So the Bhagavad Gita is unique because it shows us how to achieve the best possible in the least ideal circumstances, in the battlefield of Kurukshetra, in the most worst and most complicated clashes, taking up arms against your own kinsmen and gurus. But not to act would only allow negativity and inertia to prevail and damage society for long periods to come. So it's easy to stand on the sidelines when there's no clear options without side effects. But life doesn't work that way. Pain, sorrow, disease, enmities are challenges to the Atma to grow beyond outer limitation and to discover the inner reality. But if we don't face and overcome the difficulties of life, we remain weak and fail to discover the divine. So I think that's a key thing of the Bhagavad Gita. I would say it takes us beyond life and death. And it's about, yes.
Wonderful. I think the efforts that you made to simplify something which people consider as a treatise, which will take years and years to understand, was indeed praiseworthy. We look forward to our continued interaction with you. Ladies and gentlemen, as they say, all good things come to an end. But here I would only modify it by saying, all good things come to a pause. Dhruv has kindly agreed that he can connect with you. I have already put in his email ID in the chat box so that you can reach across to him comfortably to continue to engage in this journey of gathering more wisdom as we progress into our lives. Thank you so much, Dhruv. It was indeed a pleasure welcoming you to Mumbai, though digitally, all the way from London. And we look forward to host you physically in the near future. Jai Shri Krishna. Thank you very much, Dhruv.
Jai Shri Krishna. Thank you, Professor Maniji and the entire Bombay Management Association for organizing a wonderful event and coming to listen to the talk. And may Shri Krishna bless you all. Thank